Just give it a few moments to let people get tuned in here. This is YQL Express with Devin Hargreaves and Derek St. Jean. Smile and wave.
Just trying to get everything set up here, but okay, here we go. So it looks like we're live on Facebook now. Hello, everyone. So we got a couple of things to talk about today. We're going to start with, do you remember the staffer's name?
Omarosa Mangual Newman.
So
Apologies if I butchered that.
We're going to start off with some Trump news, as I think has become a consistent thing for us, just because he's glorious for media in a weird way like that. So
well, there's no lack of things to talk about.
And this one, though, I think is a little bit...
I don't know how this one's going to play out. So just to summarize, the staffer was fired from the White House. And so she's now just released a book called Unhinged, and it's the story of the first 100 days of presidency.
Okay.
Are you familiar with much about this individual's background?
I don't know much. I just know about like the recent stuff that's come out in regards to Donald Trump using some pretty offensive language. So
yeah, so where she kind of got her start as far as being a celebrity or getting that airtime was, I believe it was the first season, or first season of The Apprentice.
Okay.
So they go
So
way back. They've been friends.
She was a former employee of The Apprentice, or like
she was on it.
Okay,
yeah.
Interesting. That's kind of weird that our president is recycling old reality stars onto his cabinet and all of his staff too. That's kind of interesting, but
yeah. But that's where it started. I should have taken note of the year, but that was quite a while ago. And so with that, friends, she had a lot of experience with him, both taping that and having, I guess he had an open door policy during his first 100 days in the White House, at least. So she'd be walking by and he'd be, oh, come in, meet Prime Minister Trudeau, things like that.
Okay.
Definitely high level of access. I usually talk to him 2 or 3 times a day.
Oh, interesting.
So
he has had a pretty oddly open presidency, though, in a weird way. Like, it seems like he's taken things like more casually in that regard too. Like,
well, it's
especially like with his like family and friends, which is like a
I
little
would
bit
compare
taboo.
it,
So
I would compare it to when I'm sure you've got one of these friends too. You go on Snapchat or go on Facebook, and you wonder where your friend is until you see 100,000 duck face selfies. You know exactly where they are and who they're with. That's what Trump's Twitter is like. It's like a 70-year-old Snapchat.
Yeah, no.
Oh, I wonder if he has Snapchat.
That's kind of a weird way to put it, but like that's kind of true. Yeah, it'd be so strange if he ever had a Snapchat. That'd be very, that'd be a hard reality to swallow, even though it's not any harder to swallow right now. But the recent controversy with her is that he called her a dog, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the controversy comes out of her writing a tell-all book about the first 100 days, and so kind of in retaliation to that is why he called her a dog.
Okay, and then was she fired before or after that comment?
Oh, she was fired before.
Before,
Yeah.
so it's like the book came out, was fired, and then these
No,
comments.
I think she was fired, put the book out,
and then
now
comments.
he's mad.
Oh, okay.
So they're also saying there may be some sort of legal issues that arise because of this. They're saying confidentiality agreement or non-disclosure agreement. Sorry. Hi, Dory.
Oh, hello. Hi, Mom.
And her book has a lot of allegations. I guess she taped or audio recorded her getting fired in the basement of the White House.
Okay.
Why was she taken down to the basement of the White House to get fired?
Yeah, that's kind of
and
sketchy.
left there locked in for 2 hours first.
That's really weird.
Things like that. Oh, then the security issue. You shouldn't be taping in the secure basement of the White House.
True. Like a lot of this, like it's tough with like a lot of the Donald Trump era presidency, because it seems that like
the digital age.
Yeah, like, and it's a different world that America's living in right now, because so much things are allowed to go now that he's in power, because a lot of people are critical of like people who oppose him, like, and like the different tasks, like, or things that they do that are like considered unprofessional prior to his presidency. But then the irony behind that is that in a lot of ways like legitimizing these actions, because like he's kind of lighting fires, and if people fight that fire with fire, a lot of this you can't really hold against them when they're kind of fighting a different game right now with this current president. So
it's definitely interesting. There's a lot of, and for lack of a better term, I'll say allegations in the book that there's not proof of. Some people are calling into question some of the legitimacy of some of the recordings.
Yeah.
And things like that. I
Well,
guess.
I also heard about what's her name? Is it Huxby? Is that the press?
Sanders.
The lady who talks to the press?
Yeah, that's Sanders.
Oh, okay. Why do I think Huxby? Why is Huxby a name that comes up when I think of Donald Trump? I'm not sure why, but she was recently like asked by press if there's at any point going to be a tape that could exist or a recording that could exist of the president saying the N-word.
Yeah,
and
she
said
to have a recording of it. I think she did put it out.
Okay.
Hi, Nasa. Thank you. We've got verification. It is Sanders.
Oh,
that
Sarah
threw me
Sanders.
off.
Okay,
Because,
thanks, Deb. Too. We see in the comments now we have the full name. So.
Well, that threw me off, right? Because I just finished reading an article about
Okay.
Bernie.
Oh,
and then
yeah.
I'm like, why is Sanders
That'd be really
defending-
funny if they were related too. It's like some strong family battle right there. Yeah, but like I remember Sarah Sanders, and now that we have the name, she said she can't promise that doesn't exist. And
she said that she couldn't speak to whether that
Yeah.
existed,
and that's something that like I could easily see that coming forward. Like we've already heard pretty controversial and offensive things like recordings of this president. So
and Omarosa, I guess, has and I think this is one of the ones that was called Into Legitimacy. Was while she was on, she helped run Trump's campaign too, right? So
Okay.
it was a phone call between a bunch of people talking about whether or not this tape existed and how they're going to try to weather that. Honestly, even if it were to get out, I don't know how much effect it would have had. Look at some of the things he said about women during that came out during the election, and that didn't faze a lot of people.
I think what we would see is if a comment like that ever was publicly heard, I'm kind of in line with, like, we were joking about this before the show with Jim Jeffries, where it's like he kind of talks about how now it's like none of this surprises us anymore because we're so complicit in expecting this to come about. So like I think that's a factor as well with if that tape were to ever exist, would that surprise anyone? Probably not. Would we be able to like get past it really quick? Probably. And like that's an unfortunate reality we live in, I think, just because like I agree, especially like during his campaign, like when we heard some of the comments he made about women and stuff, like that's stuff that isn't always, and that was so fresh, I guess, too, like that was like, it's not even like a comment that he could have been like, oh, I made this when I was like a younger person, or like when I didn't know anything, like that was one that was very
well, and
fresh.
that's what
so.
Trudeau's and hot water for now as well.
Yeah, so it's a lot of stuff like that where it's like, how can we hold leadership to this standard now when for so long so much of this has been like permissible, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Let me go down a rabbit hole with this one. As much as most of the or left wing or commenters on Facebook and such go, they hate what Trump's saying, or they hate what he does. But do you think this is a bit of a breath of fresh air for some people, that there's actually a president that's that in tune with, sorry, not in tune, but that's socially involved, where you know what he's doing, you know what he's...
Yeah, I think there are parts of Donald Trump that are refreshing for our current population, where in one regard I think it's unfortunate because I think he does speak to a certain population, so I think there is a population of people that feel genuinely respected and represented through him, which is I would argue like that group, those groups aren't necessarily like ones that have their voices heard, but at the same time like their voices are dangerous. And then on the second regard, I think there is a certain portion of the population that is happy they have such a reflexive president. Like he's someone that feels so much more engageable because he's constantly talking, he's constantly saying things, and even if they're like controversial things or even if they're like unprofessional, at least he's doing that. Whereas like the president before this has been such a like unreachable figure, if that makes sense.
I don't know. I think Obama kind of made the presidency maybe a bit more of a personal thing, but that was more of a like a warm familial type of thing. Whereas, and I could be wrong. We weren't. I don't think either of us were as involved at that point. 8 years is a long time. But from my recollection, however accurate that may be, I don't recall the Bushes being that approachable. They did seem to be more standoffish. Deb says, how about Michelle Rumpel? She's doing awesome on YouTube right now. She's from the Northwest Nose Hill, a Calgary conservative.
Oh, Michelle, yeah, I'm familiar with that MP. I personally don't have great opinions about her, but I see why she's popular, if that makes sense. Like, she definitely does speak towards like that, sort of like, even if like a lot of the things I don't agree with her saying, she is continually talking, she's continually engaging her constituents, and then on top of that, she's one of the biggest like conservative voices in Canada right now, I'd say, where anyone from any point in the country, even if they're not from her riding, can kind of feel some sort of like I don't know what the term would be, like conservative like fraternity kind of like feel to it, where it's like she's kind of really engaging with like the current perspectives of the modern conservative. Like, again, personally, I don't agree with like a lot of the things like she says or what she represents, but I understand that she's talking towards a population that wants to be heard and that is being heard by her, if that makes sense. Are you familiar with her as well? Like
a little bit, yeah. I don't know what else I'd have to add to that. I think people do like that interaction, but social media can, or you would be told that social media can be a blessing and a curse. At one Nenshi in election, Rachel Notley seems to use a lot of social media, things like that. Not as approachable from Notley. Obviously, she's hopefully busy.
Well, and that's the thing too, is like with Donald Trump, like we know that's him, whereas like with other like leaders and stuff, so like you bring up Notley or even like Trudeau, like a lot of their social media is going to be like staffed, so it's like those aren't necessarily like comments that are 100% from them. Or
if Trump has staffers like writing those tweets, I want that job.
That would be if we ever learned that there's some sort of think tank,
a random generator,
like like that would be absolutely like world changing. But like that's I guess like same thing with like Michelle Rumpel, and like even with like our local MP, like I'm pretty sure everything she posts is like her, like no one else kind of sees it. So it's like it's a matter of like it's kind of towing the line between like what's engagement and what's professional, in my opinion, where it's like, yes, you want to like engage with the population, yes, you want to have conversations people want to talk about, but at what point does that like professionalism of being an elected official kind of like take over what you're allowed to talk about and when and who with kind of thing, if that makes sense? Because like,
and Thomas Lakazik had that same issue. He was very social media active, Twitter specifically, and I forget exactly what the comment was that he made that he got in trouble with.
And that's something too, is like with like the modern age, like you're under like a magnifying glass or a scalpel for anything posted on social media, especially if you're an elected official or anyone that's a part of like party or politically engaged, stuff like that. Like it's a double-edged sword, because like in one regards, like it's good to know certain things, but then the other, it just kind of becomes like trench fighting between like people, where it's like even if like one day Donald Trump said something like moderately like midline, it would still be torn apart, right? Just because like it's Donald Trump now at this point. But is he gonna say anything moderate? Probably never. But I guess like
you'd have to filter through everything else.
That's true. Yeah. He has to go through some pretty crazy opinions before then.
I want to touch base quickly, just because I guess I brought his name up. Thomas Lakazik. Do you remember that scandal of his $20,000 phone bill when he was in Europe on a private trip?
Because remind me again, he's
at the
NDP
time he
MLA
was PC.
Or
He's
PC,
not sitting anymore.
Okay.
This was during Alison Redford's time.
Okay.
And he had a $20,000 phone bill, and then that got leaked right before the PC Leadership Convention, where I believe it was Prentice won that one.
Yeah.
And
Well, that would make sense of where he came from, I guess, but
and it was legal reasons that he couldn't divulge that information, so he
Mhm.
kind of had to fall on his sword on that one.
Yeah.
I can't talk about this. It looks bad.
Mhm.
I guess it was another PC party member who shopped that bill around to
okay.
blackmail him almost.
That doesn't surprise me. That happens
He
pretty
just
regularly.
in the last since we last talked came out, said things have changed. He went on live radio and
Yeah.
exposed everything. So that was quite a
Did he like give a background for like what that was?
yeah. Cabinet minister, rookie cabinet minister,
Hmm.
called him and like police were at the door and it was a big story.
Okay.
He was deputy premier at the time. The premier couldn't be reached. That was my biggest question: was where was the
Yeah.
premier? That's why he was on the phone exchanging confidential files, things like that,
And then
talking to
that's
the
how-
police, because the premier couldn't be reached, and then she went missing. Nobody could find her.
Hmm.
They didn't know the details of what was going on, other than
So then, like that phone bill is
legit.
legitimate. Like it's like that person didn't just claim like an unfair expense.
Exactly.
Like
he
that
wasn't
expense
just
is like, and plus like how can you rack up that big of a phone bill? Like you know what I mean? Like unless you're doing something like
And you can get top-ups and such, but
Yeah.
at the time, the Alberta government was in a contract with, I believe, TELUS,
Mhm.
and that was part of the
like controversy.
Con-
too,
no,
or, like,
part of the contract.
confidential- Oh, okay.
that he couldn't just go buy a data top-up card or anything like that. He had to use TELUS roaming charges.
Oh boy.
And then it turned out that this cabinet minister, that was a personal matter, was a family matter. So he said, my office isn't paying for the bill, hers should.
Mhm.
They wouldn't do that, so finally Lukazik just had to sign
Yeah.
the expense forms, because phone companies got to get paid.
Yeah. And that's kind of an unreasonable thing to expect of an individual, even if they're an elected official, to pay that
Well, he
out
was
of pocket.
acting
Like
kind of in the office of the premier at
Yes,
that
yeah.
point.
that's kind of unfortunate. Like I feel
It's unfortunate that he
like-
got blacklisted from running for the PC leadership because of
yes, like and it's unfortunate that like that was like dirty laundry of everyone else in that race too, which is like even more like skeezy in my opinion, where it's like they blackmailed him for covering their asses, if that makes sense, and it's just like okay, like he has like no hope now, right? Is he coming back to politics? Is that why he like?
that. No, he said
Kinda
he had
came
no
public, or,
reason
like-
to. He said it just things have started to clear up. He said
Okay.
it on Twitter. Somebody from a 6:30 chat in
Mhm.
a major news talk show in Edmonton said, "All right, see you tomorrow." He's like, "When?" He said 5 after
Yeah.
10. He's like, "All right, I will be there." So that was really great. He gave a good critique about current state of politics, things like that. He said straight up he had no intention to come back to politics anytime
Yeah.
soon. Kind of wish he did. I have met him many times, and
Mhm.
I'm not sure if you would have, or if that was
I
kind
don't
of
think I've
before
ever
you got.
gone. No.
Okay. No, he used to come up to Fort McMurray pretty regularly back when
Okay.
Guy Boudelier was MLA, and I knew him well.
Okay.
And then
Back in your old stomping ground,
back in
pre-Lethbridge area.
pre-Lethbridge. Yeah, and then when I was on the Students Association at the college,
Okay.
we clashed a lot because of that cut that the province made to
Oh, okay, yeah,
post-secondary.
yeah. I remember. I think what year was that?
Oh, man, I'm off with this. That would have been 2012 or 2013.
Okay, because it's like that sounds super familiar. Of like when I was
yeah,
entering.
and he
in
was Minister of
post-secondary.
Education.
Okay.
I believe.
Okay, this does sound more familiar
Yeah.
now. So.
Yeah, very thick accent. I believe it's Polish.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, but very well spoken.
Yeah.
Very. I hope I'm using this word correctly. Like agrarious, where he's just bubbling personality.
Okay.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
Very so approachable.
Yeah. Well, that's unfortunate.
Yeah. It was
But
almost.
it's good now that we know like the truth of that. I guess.
You know who actually told him that somebody was out there shopping this $20,000 bill from 2 or 3 years before around was Raj Sherman
Okay.
after he was a
Oh.
liberal. Let him know that. Then again, Raj came from the
Yeah.
PC party. He got kicked out of that for calling out the. Do you remember that?
I don't.
Okay, he was an emergency room doctor. in
Okay,
the
yeah,
PC party,
yeah.
and he got booted because he was too vocally criticizing his government.
Okay.
So he sat as an independent, then he ran
As a liberal, yeah.
as a liberal,
That
and,
makes
and
sense.
took leadership there. He was
Yeah.
another great politician. I
Yeah.
liked.
I hear good things about his glory days. I joined after the fact, but
I just bug all the politicians.
yeah, that's one way to go about it. Even if you have a party card, like you might as well like just take shots at everyone. Like,
Exactly.
should we move into the Canada segment though?
Yeah. So,
Because I feel like some of our viewers that are watching, this might be a
you
point
say
of
that
like
and our viewership starts dropping.
Nobody
wants to
it
talk
spiked
about-
there for a second. I feel like this is an issue that a lot of people have an opinion on. I've found so like. If you have any like opinions on this, definitely comment below. Like, oh geez, now it is dropping quite a
Wasn't
bit. Once you look back, that's when they get scared and they're like, oh, he can see us. But yeah, definitely like comment on this because I think this is like a question that like Canadians really have to approach because I feel like this is an American issue that turned Canadian, and then it got really sticky really quick in Canadian context. So
All right, that's long enough of an intro. So we're talking about John A. Macdonald and statues, and whether or not those statues should remain or they should be removed.
yeah.
Um,
I've heard some really like interesting opinions from like every sort of perspective on this. Like, one opinion I hear a lot is that like statues are kind of seen to be like a public like commemorative thing, where it's like if there's a statue, this is a good thing. We want people to be like, hell yeah, like,
honoring.
yeah, exactly. Like
Let's
it's
put
like
you on a pedestal.
exactly. So like a lot of people are like, this should be taken down because of like his crimes to the Indigenous communities in Canada. And then it's not that they're rejecting that history; it's that they want that like in a museum is kind of like the thing, sort of phrasing that a lot of people say is like put it in a museum because like that history needs to be known, it needs to be learned, it needs to be like something like that's a reality in Canada, but it shouldn't be like this public like hoorah Sir John A. Macdonald. But then on the other side, I hear like an interesting point where it's like, well, he's our first prime minister. Like he does hold like an important historical place in Canadian context.
Yeah.
Even regardless of like who he was, if that makes sense. Like I know that's like this is where it gets really sticky, where it's like there's kind of this expectation that you need to like respect your forefathers, like regardless of who they were, where they or what they did, and even if like their opinions and values don't change. Like a lot of people look at them as like this sort of like sterile, neutral like figure in Canadian history. Like nobody really cares about who Sir John A. Macdonald was. They just know that he's their first prime minister, and that's all they need to know. Like you know,
there's
what I
so
mean?
much
Like,
more to know about him. I
Yeah,
think he's
yeah.
the only prime minister that they know
Mhm.
threw up in a garbage can because he was too drunk.
Well, I was gonna say, and like it's not like he's not already a controversial person either. So it's like, for
Is he though? How? Just until this started to recently come up, how controversial of a figure was he?
well, I feel like he's always kind of been like that Canadian joke, like how you brought up, where it's like, oh, we had to create the Senate, and like the sober second thought, like
Oh, it was definitely
like
a chamber
pinned
for
on it.
sober.
Yes, was
thought.
because of like people like him and him in particular, right? So that's what I mean by like I think people have always kind of been like comfortable putting him or like throwing him under the bus. So it's a conversation around like, you know, like this whole like statue movement did start in America.
The
And
statue movement.
the statue movement.
It's pretty much what it is.
Yeah, yeah. It did start in America,
With
and then
Confederate statues.
yes,
Lee and
yeah, and then in America though it was a little bit easier to like take them down because like the easiest argument you could make was that these people were on the losing side of a war that like was fought internally. So it's like
I don't know. I don't know how I feel about those statues either.
mhm.
Part of me feels like they should have stayed up. Put a plaque nearby explaining the history of it,
yeah,
explaining that they lost. These
Mhm.
are not heroes.
yes,
But this is what happened, right? Because it's when you rewrite or delete
Mhm.
or remove history that you're going to get into that
Yeah.
danger of falling back to that.
I think like one thing with like history and especially with like public known history, there's always an agenda behind it.
Yeah.
And that's something people don't always realize is because history is always seen as like so cut and dry, where it's like it happened. There's no like there's nothing that can change the fact that this happened, so it's like irrelevant what you think or do towards it. but what changes it is how we talk about it. It's how we see it. Like, all of that is agenda based, right? So putting up these statues in the first place, those people had an agenda that they were trying to achieve.
Well, this one went up in the 80s, and
Mhm.
they actually did talk to the guy who made the statue.
And
He said it wasn't supposed to be putting.
Mhm.
The one we're talking about specifically is Victoria City Hall.
Yeah.
The one that they just took down. My favorite part of that is, I was going to say Trump. Ford asked if they could send it to Ontario.
What's the difference between Trump and Ford right now? But no, I did hear about that, and
then
that's
they said no, but
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
the.
And that's an interesting political conversation right now. Is you have somebody like Doug Ford, sort of stepping up in favor and in defense of the statue. So right now there's no clear government perspective, if that makes sense. Like, people are being legitimized by voices in governments across the country saying yes or no to these sort of things, right?
Yeah,
So,
it's definitely a conversation starter.
Mhm.
I respect the right of Victoria City
Yeah.
Council to determine to take that off of
Mhm.
the council building.
Yeah.
Once again, would it have been more beneficial to
There,
put a plaque or to
Yeah.
put a First Nation statue?
the
or?
the compromise a lot of people have been promoting is that, where it's don't take statues down but add them. And then that conversation came up, I think it was in Montreal, and at a bank, where it's they had a plaque for a member of government who is really has a really 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 dark history with Aboriginal people, where it's they were kind of it's kind of in the Maritimes. There was that one that Proud Boys rally, if you remember, way
Yeah.
back, kind of like that kind of figure that they were defending. And this history teacher was the one who brought it up, and he was hey, this is offensive, this is contentious now, you need to change this. And then they just took it down, whereas what he would have recommended, and he was interviewed on it, was he would have rather seen a plaque that how you're saying was this history is history, this doesn't represent the opinions or values of modern Canada. Here's a story about Aboriginal people in regards to this area, and who were actually the victims of this person's whatever you want to call it,
Yeah, and I feel having things like that out in the open I can understand the argument about let's put it in a museum, but what's that really going to accomplish?
Yeah.
Right? Especially if it marks the site of something.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the site where this happened. Also, this guy
Yeah.
just completely violated the human rights of thousands of people. But then again, you have to look at the other founding fathers of Confederation, and things like that, and realize the time that he was in. One good argument, and if you're watching on Facebook Live, we are live right now. We do read the comments, weigh in, participate. One interesting argument that I read was it's so much easier to shift the blame for what we as a country and as a society did onto Johnny MacDonald, and said it's his fault that this happened because we don't want to own up to our own responsibility in the matter and have that shared blame of
That's something I've definitely seen as well, where it's a criticism of it is you can't just keep metaphorically hanging officials of the past
That's
for
beating
these
a dead
crimes.
horse.
When it's there's still crimes that today we're committing, there's still racial tensions in this country, there's still oppression that there is a certain line where it's you can take down statues, but is policy changing, is access changing,
what about the Catholic Church that's right over there? They were involved in it too.
Yeah, and then that's another,
And the Pope won't
yes.
even acknowledge it.
Well, and I was going to say that's even more of a sticky conversation in Canada too, because it's if you ask that's a very offensive thing. I saw
Hi, Gail.
hello. I saw a pretty interesting kind of that she brought up faith. I saw a really interesting post on Facebook where it was I can't remember which church it is, but it's an LDS church in Canada, and it was built to mimic a mountain range or something behind it.
No,
I think it was one in
no.
Alberta, isn't it? Or
That's the
is that in America?
that's the Cardston Temple.
Is it the Carson Temple that was
Yeah,
built?
and
so
it's
it might have been the Carson Temple too, because I remember this
and then
post got
that's-
very
oh,
aggressive really quick, but
I'm
somebody
shooting
had
myself in the butt. Chief Mountain.
Yes.
That's the
Okay.
mountain behind
Okay.
it.
There we go. So this post was criticizing that the church mimicked its design to the mountain. So the criticism was that this was a way of like colonial oppression on like Aboriginal like history, because this mountain was like seen to be like literally, or this temple was seen to be literally taking the place of that mountain.
And
is
that's
what it
a
was
very
arguing.
sacred mountain.
Yeah. And then that post, though, it got very like
Heated?
very quick, because and like where I'll give credit to like people of faith is like when it comes to their faith, that's first and foremost. So like when you're somebody of like the LDS Church, you're a member of that church first, you're a Canadian second, you're like whatever your background is third, your everything comes after that. So a lot of them were like, and like this opinion is like kind of a tricky one to navigate, where they were like our religious like purpose and our religious right does come before Aboriginal, and it does come before
I saw
Canada.
that, and there was some.
And it's like there's a lot of like conversations where it's like, I really get.
No, actually,
like,
I think I saw the comment that you're referring to, and I don't think it was our religious right. It was our God comes before.
Well, and that's what I mean. So it's like it's like I absolutely get where they're coming from, and that's why it's like it's sticky for me to navigate.
I respect your opinion on the
Yes.
value of your God, but you're
And
also infringing on someone else's.
Yes, where it's like
interpretation of-
I'm fine with that being somebody's like individual opinion. I'm not okay with that being policy, if that makes sense. Ever. Like, so that's where it's like it's tough with these, because like so many of those opinions will overlap, though, right? So it's like you'll have people who are like God comes first, therefore God comes first in the government, when it's just like, and
well,
then it's
that's
just
why
like,
we need separation of church and state.
yeah, but I mean like with like the conversation around like Sir John A, like the statues and stuff like that, like a lot of people are looking at it like this, where it's like they're defending this from a very legitimate place in their perspective, but then when it's like you can have that perspective, you can have that opinion, you can have that lifestyle, but like at what point does that become something that's going to harm another community in Canada, you know? But
And at what point do we as a society take ownership of the
Yes.
fact that it's our society that put in residential
Yes.
schools and still had them operating well under 100 years ago?
like there's still realities that our generation, our governments add to like an oppression of another
We still
group
have
of
living
people.
survivors of residential
Mhm.
schools. Okay, with that, you were going on about this one the other day. Statutory holidays.
Oh yes, so like we we had some controversy actually like posting this on Facebook through our Just FM outlets, and I'm curious to see what our audience might think about this as well.
Once again, we welcome participation, comment, like, share. Weigh in, let us know what you're thinking on what we're discussing. We do read them. Even if
Yeah.
it was something we said earlier, we can go back and
Take shots at us,
and address that.
roast us if you have to. But
yeah,
yes,
but keep it constructive. Don't
yes,
be like
yeah, I guess no, no,
all
just like
caps,
personal attacks and all that. 'Cause that's
bunch of f-bombs that happened on Derek's
this
post on
relevant post.
Go
Yeah. So,
ahead.
the government of Canada is like considering. They're kind of juggling between. I think it's a September and a March date, I believe.
One's Orange Shirt Day,
Yeah.
which is a day of
For, like,
reconciliation
yeah.
and remembrance of that, and the other one is Hi Rochelle. The other
Hello.
one is I believe it's June 21st, which falls
It's
during
June.
Aboriginal
Okay. Yeah.
or First Nations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're kind of like in the process of like really cementing like what day it's gonna be, but the whole point behind this is one of the asks of the what's the document called again? Or the process, the reconciliation.
I know what you're referring to.
I can't remember the exact name of it off the top of my head, but one of the asks was that the government create a stat holiday dedicated towards Aboriginal people in purpose reconciliation, and it's been oddly controversial because a lot of people have just been like upset that it's like suggested at all. Like it seems like there's a certain type of person that's like when they hear that they're like they go on that tirade again where it's like special interest groups getting something I don't have, and it's like you have holidays for everything else in Canada but this, and it's like it's not as controversial as people are making it out to seem, in my opinion.
I got one for you. Let's take away Victoria Day and turn that into it, rather than celebrating the monarchy that whose power
Yep. And that's something that
Government
like, and that's what I mean.
I'm gonna
like,
get hated on for that
yeah.
one, aren't I?
abolish the monarchy. And we'll get some post likes, or people will probably support us. I bet we're in Alberta. People don't like monarchs.
Some do.
Some do, yeah.
Even my own sibling is staunchly monarchist.
Oh, okay.
I just struggle to see the value of paying for royalty. That realistically,
serve
when
much of a
Elizabeth
purpose.
II moves on,
Passes away.
yeah,
Croaks.
You're making this worse. We're really gonna get hated now. Talking about
Well,
the Queen
that is
croaking.
something. Doesn't the federal government have a plan for that? Her death.
I think
There's,
the
like, a
Commonwealth does, yeah.
Yeah, because it's like no one really knows what's gonna happen post her. If we're just gonna keep the ship rowing, like with the monarch,
I think
or
the
if we're
plan
gonna
is to
ditch
keep
it.
the
Like,
ship rowing.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's part of our institution, but
Yeah.
I just don't see the value of it.
that's true.
But we're off topic. Take
Yeah.
Queen Victoria Day away, make it
Reconciliation.
Reconciliation Day.
And it's one of those ones where it's like this holiday I don't think is controversial. I've heard a lot of people like weigh in like through Facebook comments where they're like, we should have this day like mimic Remembrance Day, like where it's like there has to be like an educational, like cultural component to it, and I'm like, okay, like I can see where
But how
they're
many
coming from
people
with that.
even attend Remembrance Day?
Yeah,
Let's be
and
real.
yeah, and that's like a thing too. But like, I guess growing up in Canada, there is like a huge emphasis towards Remembrance Day, and I'm not saying that's like I'm not gonna comment towards like whether or not that's like a good or a bad thing. But there has been like this expectation in Canadian society that Remembrance Day is one of those days that like you take seriously. Everyone like
I believe it should be. It's
Yeah.
a day of remembrance for
Yeah.
those who fought and died for our country.
So like that's where it's like some people are hoping that reconciliation, like this stat holiday, can become something that mimics that, in the sense that they want it to be taken seriously. They want it to be like public. They want ceremonies and demonstrations. But then a lot of people don't want it to be Remembrance Day, like oriented or style,
I
because
think
they
it
don't
should.
think it's like
we don't need another
equivalent.
day to
Mhm.
drink beer and barbecue.
Yeah.
That would kind of defeat the purpose of
Yeah, and
having a day for
yeah. And that's why a lot of people are saying that, is because their worry is that like making it a holiday takes away like the importance of it. They're looking at it like one of the like opinions I've seen is that this holiday shouldn't be like oh, let's put our feet up on the couch, I don't have to go into work today and catch up on Game of Thrones. Like a lot of people don't want it to be that.
Or make time and a half.
Yeah. So there's a lot of controversies. I saw like comments talking about like kind of like the pay portion of it, where it's like they're like it's kind of frustrating that a government or like workers of a government are profiting off of like this holiday
That's
in a weird
really
way. So like
interesting.
yeah, it was definitely an interesting comment. Like it's one of those ones where it's like that does have to ask questions, but it looks like the other.
Yeah, Pinaquam Tail Feathers, apologies on the pronunciation if I got it wrong, said Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, 94 calls to action.
Yeah, okay,
That's-
perfect. Thank you for the
Thank you.
clarification there.
Sarah says, I think it should be something to celebrate. We should celebrate our indigenous population, culture, and history. That's a different perspective
Mhm.
instead of, I don't know.
Do you have an opinion of how it should look?
Personally, I'd like to see it not during June,
Mhm.
during the First Nations Week. I don't feel like it should take away from that or be part of their identity. I think it needs to stand alone.
Okay.
And by all means, yeah, if it is going to be a statutory holiday, I do think it should be educational. Make museums free for that day,
Like
again,
have like
along
public
those lines,
ceremonies and stuff like that.
yeah,
Like, yeah.
push it, make it a.
I think personally I would support sort of the route or like the camp of thought that wants it to be equivalent to Remembrance Day, where it's a holiday that's like serious. It's a holiday where it's educational. It's a holiday where it's like public ceremony, and like the whole point of the holiday isn't necessarily to like just have time off. It's to learn and to remember like this is something that's happened, and it's something that like I think for me looking at this like long game, like so if I'm looking at this for generations to come, I think this is a good thing, because I'm happy that Remembrance Day was created this way, because now our generation, like generations that came after, have kind of grown up to realize that like war was an awful thing and we never want to go back there. that.
Well, it was created for the First World War. Look how that worked out. We had
Well,
a second one.
Of course, but I mean, like, I think our generation does, to a degree, take that like lesson seriously still, even though it's like it's so far away to us. But I think with something like a holiday like this, these tragedies still exist today. Like it's one of those things where like soon we'll have a reality very quick where like our children won't know veterans, like they won't know veterans in the way that we did, because like a lot of us, like our grandparents served in the Second World War, stuff like that. So like our kids are coming to a point where like Remembrance Day won't hurt them as much because they never had direct family members.
Well, we've still got the Korean War,
of
the
course,
Vietnam War. That's another generation.
Yeah.
Now we're gonna have how many troops have we had in Afghanistan or for the states Iraq?
But like the argument I guess I'm making is that with this new holiday, like what's gonna hurt the most and what's gonna help us learn is that like there's gonna be people there who have suffered today.
Yeah.
So like that's where it's like on Remembrance Day you don't really have it where it's like it still feels distant, though it's like something we like value and stuff. Like there's a huge focus towards like the First and Second World War, so like these are things that have happened for us like 100 years ago, more or less.
One interesting thing I saw brought up today, I think it was who does a statutory holiday really benefit?
Yeah. Like, and that's like a huge conversation that's coming around.
If you're on the lower scale as far as income, you're going to choose to work a stat for the extra money. And really, the argument that I read, let's put it that way, not necessarily my opinions or beliefs, indicated that only the rich can afford to
have that day off.
That
being said, there's labor laws that protect people in that regard, where it's like if you've worked day,
it depends if you're salaried or if you're
part-time and stuff like that. So of course, like that's a conversation that needs to happen. But when we get on there,
Pinopoyam Tailfeather says, pick a date, any date, but it's important to make this about education, understanding, and growth.
I
think that sums it up.
Where it's
very,
like
very well said.
I don't have anything to add to that. I think that kind of sums up where I'm coming from too, personally. So
definitely. I don't mind the idea of having it on Orange Shirt Day, just for the fact that that's already kind of something
it's
for
a day. Like,
well, it depends who to. But it's something that's already got grassroots momentum that might help to help with the education and the awareness of what that day is all about. We've like breast cancer, everybody knows, pink shirts, things like that. It's just kind of the whole marketing of that, and by all means I hope it does become something that's more familiar regardless.
I guess, do we have time to mention?
I'm not in any rush, are you?
Which one? We have a couple of other talking points.
Well, let's talk about Scheer. Andrew Scheer, leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, can't seem to rein in his best friend, Maxime Bernier.
The biggest competition nearly took him out in the leadership race.
Yeah, and he's got a lot of support in Quebec, and he's got a lot of support in the more libertarian sector, and dairy.
Well, Maxime Bernier has oddly stood as this sort of like fourth party voice, I guess is how I describe it, where it's like you have somebody speaking for the Liberals, you have somebody speaking for the Conservatives, and you have somebody speaking for the NDP through their leaders. But
and then you've got good old Max.
Yeah, where it's like he's speaking to a lot of those fringe perspectives that have kind of been alienated by the current Conservative Party.
Did you have a chance to go through some of the things that he was tweeting the other day?
I don't think I did. Which, like...
he was tweeting about how...
Is this the, like, diversity is our weakness?
Diversity is our weakness.
I guess I'm probably not
if we're too no, I think that's what he said.
Okay.
That if we're too diverse, then we're going to become, essentially he was saying we're going to become little tribes and factions.
Yeah, and, like... I can understand where this perspective is coming from. Like, this is kind of like, I've seen this a lot with like conservative like minded people, where it's like there's this belief that like diversity is kind of forced in that, in like their perspective, where it's like
You're gonna get along.
yeah, it's like they're kind of like, the way they see it is like you're taking people that don't want to be together, forcing them to be together, and then getting like surprised when there's problems. Like their perspective is kind of saying like, well, what do you expect? These people don't like go together for a reason. But then I think that's so close to treading upon like things like
It's almost racist.
that's what I mean. Where it's like, why are you assuming that like we won't get along? Why are you assuming we can't get along? Like,
I mean, we've seen this before. Blacks and whites shouldn't be.
well, and that's what I mean.
Together,
Like,
right? Like,
a lot of people do believe, but like a lot of people still to this day believe in like social segregation. I don't know how to describe it. Where it's like they don't believe in like political segregation, but they believe like
Economical for sure.
yeah, and like they want to like keep to themselves. Where it's like a lot of people who are like kind of coming from this camp.
We
of,
belong
like,
in
thought.
this neighborhood. You belong in that one, kind of thing.
Yeah, like it's like segregation's like a very realistic like opinion to have, which terrifies me. But like it's
I
something
don't
that
know.
like
It's
a lot
more
of people
a,
don't.
It's a more
acknowledge.
enforceable and not as obvious means of racism almost.
And that's what I mean, like, because I think like your conversation around like the neighborhoods really gets to the point where it's like there's a lot of like NIMBYism, like that not in my backyard
Yeah.
kind of like
yeah.
mentality, where it's like a lot of people have problems like living next to like people who aren't like the same like race as them, the same faith as them, like stuff like that, where it's like and like a lot of people will just like write this off because they're like, oh, if you're born that way, like of course you don't like care about it. But like for me, it's like I grew up in a neighborhood where it's like literally every neighbor for me had some sort of different background, whether they were different from like race from us, different from faith, different from like educational backgrounds, economic backgrounds. Like I live in a neighborhood where like your employment and like your kind of like income level isn't relative, if that makes sense.
The coolest people that way.
Exactly. Like our neighborhood's not like where it's like now in like the city of Lethbridge, like we have a lot of neighborhoods that are like income oriented, like 100%,
Yeah.
where it's like we're just trying to segregate people to like how much money you make, which it like, and this is what I mean by like segregation is like a very common thing in our world, because we kind of assume we have to do it, whether that be by race, faith, or like income, because we build our cities that way. Like,
I think the religious aspect of that's kind of going away at
Mhm.
that. The race one, I don't know if I have enough personal experience to stick to. I always go where the rent's cheapest. So.
Yeah, and I would say like from like we wouldn't know that the same way like people of color would, in the sense that like
That's valid.
a lot of people of color that I've met, and then even like there's a professor like at the university, like
He
Yale
just
Belange.
resigned, didn't he?
Are we thinking of the same person?
Probably not.
Okay, because I
sorry.
was like, if he
Didn't
resigned,
mean to
like,
interrupt
that's,
you.
that's just like I'd have to like jump on Twitter right now. Yale. Or
Check it. Somebody just resigned from the
Okay,
university.
then I will check it. That'll surprise me. But yeah, Professor like Yale Belange, he did a study in Lethbridge about Aboriginal renting. So he did like this study where it's like how do Aboriginal people feel in regards to how they're renting.
Oh, like First Nations housing.
Yeah, yeah,
kinda
and then like just
different.
people like regardless of like any reason you're looking for housing, stuff like that, versus how do renters feel towards Aboriginal people. And what he found is what is to be expected, but it's still sad. Where he realized like a lot of renters are like, I'm not gonna rent to Aboriginal people. They're such a high risk group. And then he'd be like, well, what do you mean? They're like, well, they don't make money, they don't do this, they don't do that. And it's like a lot of these renters are making assumptions to save like their bottom line in regards to that. And then Aboriginal people are saying things like,
Not renters, but landlords.
landlords, yeah, sorry. And then a lot of the renters who are Aboriginal were saying like things like where it's like, you know, you had to jump through so much more hoops than like what like a white person would have to, if that makes sense. So it's like a white person, you barely have to have a paycheck to get a house. Whereas like with them, it's like
getting
they
harder
were,
too. I saw something the other day about how single moms with children are having a really hard time in
well,
Lethbridge.
and that's what I mean too. Is it's where it's like, but then that still doesn't that still enforces like this like conversation of like sort of that like
that
oppression of that like
economic.
yeah like that expectation where it's like single mothers aren't seen as like natural, as people put it, where it's like, well, you can't raise your kids on your own, you need a husband to like support you and all this kind of stuff, where it's like a lot of people need like that
Yeah.
like engineered social reality for them to feel comfortable, when it's like
Oh, if that's
like
definitely engineered. That's a
Mhm.
good way to
Well, it
distract
absolutely is, because your life will not change by who your neighbors are unless they're mean. Like, and that's like, unless you're fighting over the lawnmowers or like the fence lines, like it is irrelevant who your neighbors are, because like twofold. One, you either just don't interact with your neighbors. A lot of people like keep to themselves, or if you do, they're not going to be rude to you because you live like you know what I mean. There's like, it's kind of like
I've had
mutually
some pretty
assured
awful,
like destruction.
pretty awful neighbors. I
Yeah,
can
that's
tell
true.
you.
But and well, that's what I mean. Like, you can have neighbors, but you should hate your neighbors because they're bad people, not because they're like a different race or a different culture, like things like that, right? So, but yeah, like I said, like for me, it's like I've grown up in a neighborhood where it's like everyone is a different type of person, like different, like our neighbors to our right have a different faith from us. Our neighbors to the left come from a different country. Neighbors across the city. Yeah, so
okay.
it's like
I didn't want to assume. I'm pretty sure I've
it's
seen you spewing something about
yeah,
your religion
I've
all
had
over Facebook.
quite a controversial past with my religious opinions. But
Stop posting on Facebook. We talk about Trump needing to get off Twitter. Somebody take Derek's phone away.
Take me off of Facebook. Yeah. But yeah, and it's like across the street from us. Like a lot of people, like we have like wealthier neighbors. We have neighbors who are like in the arts community. Neighbors who are hardline conservatives, like everything, right? So
we are kind of getting to time. I don't think the next show's till 8, so I mean we could go for another hour. Jesse's rolling his eyes. No, wrap it up. No, he wasn't. I was just.
Do you want to go for another?
Yeah. I wanted to quickly talk about Saudi Arabia.
Mm-hmm.
For those of our viewers who may not be familiar with it, Canada got in a lack of a better word, urinating competition.
That's one way to say it.
About human rights, and these are violations that have. I wasn't sure if you could say that.
Yeah, well, we get dinged for saying that. Maybe I'm not sure.
Yeah, and human rights are a huge deal, but these are no new infractions. This stuff's been going on for years, so we just decide now to make a big deal out of it. Did you know that Saudi Arabia has a exchange program with Canada where they send their medical students to train here? Now and Saudi Arabia is pulling everybody out. Yeah. Over 1,000. Well, there's 16,000 students.
Yeah, that are separate from that medical student category, right?
Yeah.
Or is that included? But I heard they pretty much like pulled.
I think most of the 16,000 students are in the healthcare industry.
Yeah.
And then another thousands of Saudi medics. They have to be out of here by the 31st, and Health Canada has no idea what the hell they're going to do.
Yeah. Well, and this has been a tough issue to navigate. A lot of people are kind of upset with like our government for like starting this, is how they're putting it, where it's like they're kind of looking at like our government as like making like a mistake, I guess. Personally, I don't think we did. I have some pretty choice words towards Saudi Arabia right now that I might bite my tongue towards not saying those right now.
Well, I've been saying this stuff for years, but why do human rights just become important on election years?
Yes, and like that is something where it's like I can absolutely be critical of that, where it's like, why aren't we constantly like kind of like,
if that's what you actually believe, then deal with that.
And this is a tough issue, like in general, like in regards to like the academic study of like international relations. Even huge conversation is can other sovereign states criticize other sovereign states, or is that like a no-go?
But I love
like,
let's go back to our last conversation. Why are we more concerned about rights in Saudi Arabia when we have First Nations here that don't even have potable drinking water?
It's one of those things where it's like this is tough, because like personally I think we need to do it all where it's like we need to be critically internally and then also externally, because I think like as somebody who kind of like believes in like a global like structure, like some sort of like global community, I do think that's like something we live in regards to, especially in a digital age. I think it's definitely like a point when we need people to be kind of at a certain standard that like I personally support like the government like criticizing this other like state.
Well, then Trudeau goes and says that they want a good relationship with Saudi Arabia and then conceded that they're making progress in human rights. So that's kind of backpedaling.
It is, but then at the same point it's like you do have to kind of give and like I know this sounds absolutely like bonkers and like backwards to say, but like you kind of have to give them baby steps in some regards, where it's like when certain countries are like for North Korea as an example, right? If North Korea were to do anything small, it'd be a huge step forward for them because they're so behind.
Yeah.
Where it's like, and like I'm using this intentionally. I'm absolutely making a value statement. If you're like any like countries like Saudi Arabia, North Korea, stuff like that, you are a bad country. I will absolutely like fight that and like stand on that hill, and I will die on this hill. Like,
what do you got against South Korea?
Well, it's like I'm saying North Korea. Did I say South Korea?
You said South Korea,
Oops,
North Korea.
Okay, my bad. Sorry, I thought I said South Korea and Saudi Arabia.
I mean, this is live. You can go back and check. Maybe
Yeah,
I heard
that's true.
you
Okay.
wrong.
If I said South Korea, I didn't mean South Korea. But like those are absolutely regimes I will not personally tolerate or defend in any regard, and I'm willing to like brush aside all those conversations around like, oh, sovereign states aren't allowed to criticize other sovereign states. I don't care if you're doing this is wrong. But I agree with you where it's like it is.
Because Kim Jong-un is watching this broadcast.
And he sends a nuke to Canada today. If we get nuked, I guess it's my fault.
They have yet to get a nuke actually out
Yeah,
of their own country.
but he still might try.
You're gonna put all of President Trump's hard work down the toilet?
I'm on a blacklist for travel now. I guarantee you. After I said that, but I agree where it's like it is frustrating that like these conversations come up during elections, because then it's like how much of this is like domestic power that they're trying to gather versus like legitimate international action, and then even more so to your point where it's like it's really hard to like criticize another country when we still have progress to make. That being said, I would say that like their progress is further back than ours is.
Definitely.
Like where it's like I'm not saying that we don't have like bad things that we do today that we still need to address, but I do recognize that there's countries that have been doing.
I mean, women can vote here, so we're.
And like in the Saudi Arabia, they arrested like a kid for filming a YouTube video in like a crosswalk or something too. Did you ever hear about that?
No, I think that was for dancing.
Yeah, and it's like dancing's illegal there, isn't
Yeah.
it? Like, yeah, and it's like,
Yeah.
what is this, Footloose? Like, you know what I mean? Like, Tabor's not the new Footloose. It's Saudi Arabia who thought.
Tabor too.
Yeah, Tabor. Not to gather more than 5 people and dance or whatever. Like, but in Saudi Arabia, that women are allowed to drive now. But then that wasn't even made like because they have a monarchy, correct? So it's like, so that
They have a government too, though.
But do they have a government? So it's like
Well, you'll need to fact check on that.
yeah, but yeah, that's one of those ones where it's like so much of it is like a monarchy that like is in direct control is such a double-edged sword, because it's like if you have somebody who's like absolutely progressive and like willing to do stuff like that, it's great because then they make unilateral changes with no resistance. But if you have somebody who's a tyrant, you're screwed. Like,
But I think that just about wraps it up for us. Did you have anything you wanted to? Any final last words?
No, because I could rant about anything we talked about today. So I'll just take this as my point to gracefully
Gracefully
to finish it out. Yeah.
Thanks everyone for watching. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
participating. Thanks Jesse Parmer for running our video again. We probably couldn't figure it out without you. This is YQL Express, Devin Hargreaves, Derek St. Jean, and thanks for tuning in.